Hi.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook. Today, guys, we are going through my top 10 books of 2021. This was not an easy feat, but I wanted to give you guys a condensed video. If you want to see my 2021 in a snapshot, these were the absolute best books I read all year, best of the best. It was a very tight race, but we had to make some decisions, and honestly, I am perfectly happy with the list I came up with. Just looking at the stack in front of me, I'm like, my heart is so full. This was a fantastic year. I think I'm just gonna start at number 10 and work my way back to number 1 because that's kind of fun. Yeah, this is gonna be a long one, so let's just get into it. So number 10, the 10th best book I read in 2021 was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I read this in summer. I feel like it was seriously one of the top books of the summer that everyone was talking about, and it totally lived up to hype. Complete 5 stars. Every single one of these books I'm gonna talk about is a 5-star book, but I gotta say it anyways. This story is a friends to lovers, which is a genre I'm very picky about. When it's done right, it's one of my favorites, but when it's not, I'm not about it. This one completely just checked off every single box in the book. This story follows a girl named Poppy and a guy named Alex. They basically met their first week of college, and we know that every summer they've gone on a vacation together. It's kind of a tradition that they started that they just kept up, and now present day we know that something happened to make them stop going on these vacations. They're no longer in contact with each other until now. They are reuniting. There's a family wedding that they're both gonna go to, and they're now on a new vacation. So every other chapter flashes between the present and the past. Present day, we're seeing this tension between them. We know that something obviously happened to make them stop talking. We're trying to figure out what that is. We're trying to understand what is going on here, and at the same time, every other chapter we're jumping back in time to various vacations they went on throughout the years, which was so fun because they went to like so many different locations, and just you see their like bond build, their relationship build, and you're wondering like what could have possibly happened to make these two people that are so close like not speak anymore. And it was just so good. This was just really one of those books that made you think. I related to Poppy so much, and Alex was I just loved it. Seriously, I would wait until summer to read this book if you possibly can, because the vibes are just immaculate. It was just a fantastic time. I adore this book and I can't wait to reread it. The 9th best book I read in 2021 was actually the last book I read of the year, but it just completely, it went straight onto this list because it's gonna be an all-time favorite. It was one of the best books I've ever read. A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. This one is freaking heart-wrenching. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I've never sobbed more in my life to any other book than I have this one. Chapter 2, Chapter 5, Chapter 10, the entire middle, and probably an hour after I finished it. It was just beautiful, but so rough. Basically, this story follows this guy named Rune and this girl named Poppy as well. Funny enough. Rune, at the beginning of the story, we see that Rune, whenever he was 5 years old, he is from Norway, and his father got a new job in Georgia, or he got transferred to Georgia for work, and he ends up moving into this small town, and he lives right next door to this girl named Poppy, and they are the same age, and right off the bat, they just hit it off. They become the best of friends and become super close, and we see that they basically are always attached at the hip. They end up, you know, becoming more than friends as they get into high school. They just have this love and this soulmate connection like I've never read in any other book. And then right about their sophomore year of college, they're 15, I think, Rune's father learns that he's being transferred back to Norway. So the two have to separate. It is absolutely devastating. Rune is furious at his father, furious at his parents, furious at his life. Like, he's just devastated by it, but what is he gonna do other than go? He's a kid, he can't stay here by himself, but his father assures them they'll eventually come back to Georgia. Their life is here, but still he's being taken away from Poppy, and he can't imagine a worse thing. They agree that they're gonna, you know, continue to talk. This isn't gonna be the end of them. So they do that. Rune moves back to Norway and they talk for a couple months, but then one day Poppy just cuts him off completely with no reasoning. He doesn't know why. He's completely just distraught, doesn't know what to do, but he just never hears from her again. And then the book flashes forward again. About 2 years later, Rune and Poppy are both seniors in high school, and we learn that Rune is moving back to Georgia in the same house. They never sold their house, so he's moving back in. We're seeing Poppy is very stressed about this, and Rune is a completely different person when he comes back because he's obviously very like hardened and heartbroken over this Poppy thing. He's like gotten into like a bad group of people. He wears leather jackets, he smokes cigarettes, like he's just not the same person anymore because he's been so affected by this. And there's obviously going to be this big tension build up reunion scene of like, why did you cut me off, what happened? And when we learn the reasoning for Poppy cutting Rune off, it, I promise, will tear your heart straight in two. And then the rest of the story is just what I told you is just the very, very beginning of this book. And then there's a whole journey after that that is just, I don't have words. I'm not going to explain the title of this book. I'm not going to explain anything else because truly you just need to go read it to experience it. But have a box of tissues with you because it's a rough one. Number 8. The next book of this year that I just loved so very much was another one that I read pretty recently. I think actually in the month of December. December was a blur, if I'm being honest, but Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I actually listened to this on audiobook before I went through and read it, which I 110% recommend because this book is written in script format. There is nothing but dialogue because it's written as a sort of documentary. It's basically following and retelling the story of this band, Daisy Jones and the Six. It was a fictional band. They were the biggest and most popular, successful band in the 70s, and this girl is basically interviewing all the members of the band, all the people that were involved in the success of the band, and we're basically learning like how they came to be, how they rose to fame. We get to see them write this album that was like the biggest album ever at the time, and then see them ultimately break apart and go their separate ways. And it is just so well done. It felt so freaking real, especially listening to it and like putting voices to the people. And it just literally, when it finished, I cried because I wanted so badly to be able to go and like watch videos of this band perform, be able to like listen to the album that this band created. It just is such an interesting story. Daisy is such an interesting character. A big part of the story is kind of the battling between her and the lead singer and lead kind of frontman of the Six, Billy Dunn. They're both so insanely talented and insanely stubborn. They want what they want and they're willing to fight tooth and nail for it. And there's a lot of tension between them, a lot of differences, but it's just, it gets really interesting. And the ending is just, oh, I 100%. This is a very different type of book, different from anything I read this entire year, but it was just so good. And number 7, I had such a hard time placing this book because I love it so much, but I just feel like this book and this series just shaped my channel and my life so much this year. I've talked about it so much. Corrupt by Penelope Douglas, and in all honesty, the entire Devil's Night series, I'm just gonna hold Corrupt up because that's very heavy, and I'm just gonna basically explain this book, and then that will kind of lead me to explain the rest of the series because that's the easiest way to do it. This was the first book I read by Penelope Douglas, and she ended up becoming like my favorite author this year. I read basically every book she's written, and I just can't get enough. I'm gonna read everything she writes from here on out. But yes, Corrupt. This story and this series is set in this small, very rich community. I got very much Gossip Girl vibes from it, even though Gossip Girl is like in Manhattan. Just the way that the families are, the way that it's set up, like that's very much how it is to me. But this story in particular follows Erica, everyone calls her Rika, and she has grown up next door and very close to this family called the Christ family. She's always been closest to Trevor, who is the younger brother of the family. They are friends their entire childhood, and they end up dating once they get into high school, and her and Trevor are obviously very close, but she's always just been completely enamored with Michael, who is Trevor's older brother. Michael is like the most popular guy in school. He's the captain and the star of the basketball team, but what he's really most known for is he's a part of this group called the Four Horsemen. It's him and 3 other guys that are on the basketball team. Basically, they just wreak havoc, they get into trouble, but they don't ever actually get into trouble because they wear these masks the entire time they do it. They're like these paintball masks that look like skulls. Everybody knows it's them, but because they're all the sons of like very important people, like a senator, business moguls, like nobody's going to like step on those toes and call them out. These guys are always causing trouble, but the one thing they're really known for is Devil's Night, the night before Halloween. That's the day every year that they just go the most absolute bonkers. They throw these huge parties. Lots of wild things happen, but they also are known for like vandalizing stuff, just messing with the town. We learned that, you know, they get away with this for a long time, but there is one Devil's Night where every one of the guys except for Michael ends up getting arrested. And we know that somehow Rika was involved with that night and them getting arrested, but we don't know how. So now, present day in this book, we're seeing it's years later. Erica is now going to college in this other city, and it just so happens to be the same city that Michael is now a professional basketball player. And she doesn't know this yet, but the other 4 horsemen are all out of prison now, and they're ready to seek their revenge on her. So this book is so interesting because every other chapter jumps. I love time jumps. They're seriously like one of my absolute favorite things in books. But present day, we're seeing her now like reunited with Michael. Again, a lot of tension. We're seeing these guys like angry at her, ready to seek their revenge. And then also every other chapter is jumping back to the past on that Devil's Night, seeing what unfolded, how they got arrested. It's just a journey of a freaking story. One of the spiciest books I've ever read in my life. Like, I have never, when I read this, I was just like, I didn't know books like this existed. I could not put it down. But this is the first book in the series, and then every other book in the series follows each one of the boys. So this one is Michael's book, and then we have like Kai, Damon, and Will. So all the boys have their own book. Corrupt is a standalone, but if you're gonna read the rest, you do have to read the whole series because there is like an overarching story, but each book is also kind of a standalone because each one focuses on one of the guys with a different girl. Every book in this series is so good, but book 3 and 4. Book 3 is probably the best like overall story, but book 4 is just my favorite guy by a mile, and just the flashback scenes of Nightfall, because all of them have flashback scenes. They all have dual point of view. Just absolutely everything. If you haven't read this series yet, if you're looking for something spicy and just so freaking good, do it. Okay, I believe we are at number 6 now. Look at us go. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This book holds such a special place in my heart. I feel like this is going to be like one of my all-time favorite comfort reads just forever. I feel like I could read it over and over again. I only read it a couple months ago, and I feel like I already am just dying to like dive back into it. It's a thick boy, but it's so worth it. So this story follows this girl named Vanessa. She works as the personal assistant to this man named Aiden Graves. He is a professional football player. He plays for this team in Dallas, and he is like the best defensive player in the league, so looked up to, and he's known as the Wall of Winnipeg because he's from Winnipeg and he's a defensive player. Get it? So Vanessa started working for him just because she was looking for a job. Like, she didn't know anything about him, doesn't know anything about football, and she got the job and she's amazing at it. But Aiden is horrific to work with. He's just so grumpy. He's so talented when it comes to football, but like he has no personal skills. Like, he doesn't know how to say please or thank you. He barely knows how to speak to anyone at all. He's really strict in his schedule. Like, he needs like 5 square meals a day at this exact time. He needs to be working out at these certain hours. Like, nobody can put up with him in the world besides Vanessa, because she just has such a thick skin and she just knows, how to handle him. But at the start of the story, we're seeing that her time is up. She's ready to quit. She's been there for a couple years. She's been saving up money. She's ready to go off on her own and be like a graphic designer, do freelance stuff. So she wants to quit. Several things kind of happen, but she basically ends up quitting, and she's away for a few weeks, maybe a month, but Aaron very quickly shows up on her doorstep and is like, this is the man that has never shown her an ounce of appreciation in her entire life, and it's like, I need you to come back. I need you to be my assistant. Nobody else gets me like you do, like, please. And she's like, no, I'm not coming back. And this goes back and forth several different times, and then eventually she's like, okay, what is really going on? I can tell something's been up with you for the past like couple months. Like, you can clearly find another assistant. What's the real problem here? And we learn basically that Aiden, because again, he's from Canada, he's from Winnipeg, his visa is expiring, and he's kind of like in between teams right now. His contract's about to expire. He doesn't know if he wants to stay at his Dallas team or if he wants to switch. He's kind of in limbo, and his visa's about to expire, so he's gonna be deported if he doesn't figure something out, and he wants to stay in America. So very much like my favorite movie in the entire world, The Proposal, he needs someone to marry him, and Vanessa's like, great, there's a million girls that'll marry you, go find one. And he's like, I can't stand anybody, but I can tolerate you, and you know my schedule better than anyone. Basically tells Vanessa he needs her to marry him. This is the very beginning of the story, so not really spoiling anything. That's the basic concept, but she's not about it. But eventually he ends up convincing her, because Vanessa has a ton of student loan debt, and he's like, I'll pay all your student loans, I'll buy you a house, please marry me. So this turns into a fake dating situation. Enemies to lovers, workplace romance is my favorite trope of all time. Fake dating is like probably my second favorite trope of all time. This combines the two, and just, it is the slowest of slow burns. Mariana Zapata is known for that. And just Aiden, like when he comes out of his shell and whenever you like see their bond just slowly like increase, and like it just, I adored this book. Like I have not stopped thinking about it since I finished it. It gets me all like warm and fuzzy and giddy. I love it. I adore it so much. I know it looks a little weird with the football. I promise it's like not really, there's very little actual football involved. The cover's a little not cute, but I promise the contents are incredible. Okay guys, we are in the top half. We're in the top 5. This is very exciting. My number 5 is a book that I have not stopped thinking about since I finished it. Do with that what you will once I tell you what it's about, but if that to me is a tell that it's just like, it's an all-time favorite if you can't stop thinking about it. It's another book by Penelope Douglas. Like I said, she became probably my favorite author this year. Credence. If you guys have read this, you're already like, oh, I understand. This story is by far the wildest book I've ever read in my life, but genuinely with zero shame, I love it. I love it so much. Pretty much this story follows this girl named Tiernan. Her parents have suddenly passed away. They were very famous celebrities and she was an only child. They pretty much never gave her any love or attention. She was always by herself, and they end up suddenly passing away, and she is like 2 weeks away from turning 18, and she's just like, well, I guess I'm on my own now. But she ends up getting a phone call from this guy that she had heard of in passing. He's basically her uncle, but he's not her uncle. I need to emphasize that now. He's her dad's stepbrother. The dad and him basically never had a relationship. She's never met him in her life. She'd heard of him, but they don't know each other. There's no actual blood relation there. But he ends up calling her and saying, hey, I heard what happened. You're more than welcome to come and stay with me and my sons. Like, I know you're about to be an adult, but I just want to put the offer out there because he's really her only like remaining relative. And she lives in LA. He lives in like the mountains of Colorado. And at first she's like, no, like she's hesitant obviously because she doesn't know him, but the idea of like having a family and going somewhere and getting away, it intrigues her. She ends up agreeing, and she goes to live with this uncle and her cousins. I don't even want to call them that because they're not related, but basically she ends up going there and they live in the mountains again. They have this motorcycle repair business, they have a farm, but they pretty much like live off the land, not something she's really used to. And the big kicker here is they get snowed in like 6 months out of the year. So this is a big culture shock for Tiernan, but she very quickly gets close with the uncle and each of the cousins, Noah and Caleb. They all have very interesting things about them, and let's just say when you're snowed in the mountains with nothing else to do, bonkers things happen. It sounds absolutely wild, and it is, but I promise there's like a legitimate story to this. It's actually fairly wholesome, and like certain things that happen in this will be burned into my brain for the rest of my life, for better or for worse. This book is incredible. If I haven't scared you off yet, please consider reading it. There's so many people that were like terrified to read this, and then they ended up messaging me after and they're like, girl, okay, it was crazy, but thank you and you're welcome. Just God. Okay, number 4. I still smile every time I see the cover of this book because just freaking look at it. The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I think everybody and their mother read this book this year, as they freaking should, because it was so good. This story basically follows this girl named Olive. She is a PhD student in the biology department at Stanford, and the concept of the story is a little wonky, but the best way to explain it is she is trying to convince her best friend that she is over this guy that Olive was previously dating, because her best friend is into him, and they hit it off way better than Olive and this guy ever did. She didn't really care that much for this guy in the first place, but her best friend is very hesitant to date him because girl code. She's like, I'm not gonna do that to you. You dated him. So Olive, in an attempt to convince her friend that it's fine, is like, don't even worry about it. I'm already seeing someone new. And in fact, I'm going on a date tonight with him. That night, however, though, Olive doesn't have a date. It's like a Friday night, and she is going to the lab to work. And while she's working, she ends up seeing her best friend there. So in a panic, she ends up turning around, grabbing the first and only guy that she sees and kissing him so that her friend can see it. And when she pulls away, she realizes that it is Dr. Adam Carlson, the notorious professor that everybody can't stand because he is like an absolute hard ass. He's like fails everybody. He is really famous and renowned for his work in biology, but in general, people are terrified of him, and she as well is terrified of him, and she's like, oh my god, what did I just do? That entire interaction is very funny. It's the very beginning of the book, but her friend sees it, and then word ends up spreading throughout the department very quickly, like wildfire, that Olive and Dr. Carlson are dating, and Olive doesn't know what to do because she kind of has to keep up this act because she genuinely wants her best friend to think that it's fine to date this guy that she likes, because it is fine. On the other side of the coin, Adam Carlson is also going through an issue right now of his funding from Stanford has been cut because they think he's a flight risk. They think that he's gonna go move to another university because he's really famous. A lot of people want him for his work. So they've cut his funding because they don't want to pay him to do work and then he just leaves. So they end up deciding it is in their best interest to continue to fake date because Stanford will probably be more likely to give him funding if he's in a serious relationship in the town, because it's like, why would he leave? He's happily with somebody. So it's a win-win situation. They agree to fake date. Again, another fake dating kind of workplace romance. This book, Adam Carlson, he was inspired by Adam Driver. It's kind of like a Raylo inspired story if you watch Star Wars and know what that is. But it was just, again, I haven't stopped thinking about this book since I read it. Chapter 16, if you've read it, you know, it's so freaking cute. It's one of probably the best fake dating story I've read thus far. It just, so good. Okay, number 3, here we go. Are you guys ready for it? From Blood Nash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The entire Blood Nash series. I haven't shut up about it this year because it's seriously, when I read this, my like title on my thumbnail was, this is the best book I've read in 10 years, and I wasn't lying. Like this, especially when it comes to fantasy, I've never read a better fantasy book in my entire life. I've never read a better fantasy series. The combination of everything involved in this story, like the storyline, the world building, the spiciness, the characters, like it just is all so freaking god tier. It's really hard to explain. Essentially, it's about this girl also named Poppy. What the heck? What are the odds that 3 of my 10 favorite books of the year all have a main character named Poppy? That's weird. It's about this girl named Poppy, and she is a maiden. She basically was born in a shroud at birth. She lives in this kingdom. She wears this veil. Nobody's really allowed to talk to her, and she is, basically it is her birthright that she is going to ascend whenever she becomes of age, and that is going to like save the kingdom. We don't know what ascending means at the beginning of the story. It's something we're trying to figure out. Poppy doesn't even really know what it means, but she pretty much at the beginning of the story, ends up losing her royal guard and she needs a new one. So she's appointed this new guy named Hawk. When he's appointed her guard, she realizes, oh my god, they had had a previous interaction where he didn't know it was her. A very spicy interaction. You'll just have to see. But their tension, everything between them is just absolute god tier. Hawk is the man. I can't. So many people say they want like a movie or a series created of this book, and I'm like, I want it too, but Hawk simply would have to be the most attractive man to ever exist, or it just wouldn't work for me, because this man is unreal. Quite literally unreal, but it was real to me, you know? There's a lot to this story. Again, lots of world building. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to like spoil the story or anything, but there's like vampires in this world, werewolves in this world, lots of other things that I've never heard of but are just still so amazing and interesting. The entire series is so good. Book 2 might be my favorite, like if possible. I don't even know if it's possible to be better than this book, but just incredible. I'm still not over it. The 4th book in the series is coming out in March, and I'm not mentally prepared, but yeah, Blood Nash, go read it. My number 2 favorite book of this year. Honestly, these 2 books, they could be interchangeable. I'm not willing to put one over the other because they're so completely different from each other, and depending on my mood, like they're just in my like absolute all-time favorite, never gonna change, just obsessed. But I'm gonna put this one at number 2 just for the sake of, I don't know. The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. If you've watched me for any amount of time, I never shut up about this book. It is just everything to me. Again, my favorite movie ever is The Proposal, and this book is so similar to that, but honestly better in a lot of aspects. It's just This story follows a girl named Lucy and a guy named Joshua. They worked for publishing houses separately that ended up merging together. And because the houses merged together, they basically have the same position now. They are both assistants to the co-CEOs. So they work in the same office together, right across from each other, all day, every day. They can't stand each other. They bicker over literally everything. They're polar opposites. Joshua is like straight laced, like organized, where Lucy is kind of like chaos and butterflies and rainbows, like total like grumpy sunshine. They do not mix. And at the start of the story, we end up learning that they are now up for the same promotion as chief operating officer. Like they are both the top picks. So they're now battling each other for that position. And a lot of things happen, but the whole premise of the story is we basically learn the line between hate and love is real thin. And this is the greatest enemies to lovers workplace romance I've ever read. I know there's others out there, but this one I know like set that precedent. Like this is the one. And I feel like so many books have been modeled after this book since it came out. And Joshua Templeman is my favorite book boyfriend of all time. Like just the banter between these two, the tension, like everything that happens, my heart just exploded. Like some of the lines Joshua said, I reread this book recently, they had me blushing like a friggin' idiot. Like I'm just like, it's just the little things. It's so smooth. Just the freaking love story of this, the way that Lucy is, again, I feel like I relate a lot to her as a character. I can't say enough things to do this book justice, but seriously, just add it to your 2022 TBR. If you have not read it yet, this has to be the year. It's incredible. And the last book, I'm giving this my #1 spot, but again, interchangeable with The Hating Game because I just love these both with my entire heart and I don't know if I could ever choose, but this book, it just hits different. It's the best written book I've ever read. It's Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. My heart, my whole freaking heart. This story follows this girl named Tate. At the start of the book, she is just now moving to San Francisco to move in with her brother. She is going to graduate school for nursing. She's already an RN, but she's getting her master's degree. So she's going to move in with her brother temporarily while she's in school to save some money. He's a pilot, so he's never really home anyways. So as she's moving into the apartment, her brother's not home. She gets to the door and she sees this drunk guy passed out against it. She ends up learning that he is actually her brother's best friend, Miles. He's a pilot as well. He lives across the hall and she ends up having to like help him into the apartment. He is like belligerent drunk. He keeps mumbling, he keeps calling her Rachel. He's like bawling his eyes out. She doesn't know what's going on with him, but she ends up like putting him to bed on the couch. And when she wakes up the next morning, they have a very interesting initial interaction. They do not get off on the best foot with one another and she doesn't like him. She doesn't want to like him, but very quickly, they both cannot deny that they are attracted to each other over the next like few weeks / month. And the thing about Miles and Tate is a very focused person. She literally spends every minute of her day either at school or working. Like she's very career focused. She's like 23. She has no interest in being in a relationship right now and she honestly doesn't have any time for one. Like she just is trying to focus on herself. And Miles is just a whole nother story because this man refuses to be in love. Like he's like, I cannot be in love again. I will never be in love again. So they pretty much say, if we do this, it's going to be purely physical, no strings attached sort of situation. And Miles gives Tate the rule of, if we do this, you can never ask me about my past and you can never expect a future. And Tate doesn't love that, but honestly, you know, she agrees to it because she's into Miles. And again, she doesn't have time for a relationship either. So she's like, sure, I can handle this. I can do this. You know how these things tend to go. But in this story, every other chapter, we're seeing Tate and Miles present day, their situation. But every other chapter, you are seeing from Miles' point of view, 6 years ago, from the very first time that he met this girl, Rachel. And you're seeing their love story, how they met, how they fell in love. And then you're seeing ultimately like what has caused him to be this way. It's so interesting the way that it jumps back and forth because you're like, what could have possibly hurt this man in this way to make him feel this way about love and to never want love again? And when everything is revealed, it's just like heart shattering. But again, Miles is just like, I'd freaking die for him. Like he just hurts my heart, like his poor soul. Like He's just so beautifully broken, and we love a beautifully broken boy, but this book is just incredible. Again, just like the way that it's written is so unique and different, especially those flashback chapters with Miles. Like, I won't give it away, but you'll see. It's just done in a very different way, and it's so beautiful and just so creative and unique. Colleen Hoover just blows my mind. Like, I don't think there is anyone better than her. Like, as when it comes to writing, like, she's just has such a like diverse portfolio. She can truly do anything, and she just does it all well, and it's just, you don't even feel like you're reading a story. It feels like you're in it, and it just blows my mind. This was my favorite book I think I read all year. My favorite book just about of all time. I love you. I love you so much, but if I'm being completely honest, this one, it just, everything to me. But yes, guys, that is it. Those are my top 10 books of 2021. It was an incredible year. I read so many good books, but these were the best of the best and the ones that I would definitely recommend the most to anybody. Go ahead and add all of these to your 2022 TBR. You're welcome. But yes, guys, feel free to tell me your favorite books of the year down below. If there's any books you're super excited for this coming year, if you've read any of these, give me your thoughts, all the things. But yes, that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon.